Welcome back to Lost Odyssey. So there's actually a good handful of dreams in this spot, the refugee camp. So
I'm guessing that with the game kind of drawing closer towards its conclusion, they stockpiled the last few dreams in this area.
Well, technically, remember, Joe, when we started this playthrough, we had a crap ton of dreams at the beginning as well. It's clear that the developers didn't anticipate someone like me having a checklist of where each individual dream is, and they wanted you to find the dreams just by exploring at random.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with having them clumped together, honestly.
In this part, the game...
The village closest to heaven.
Uh-oh. If a title like that, I'm sure...
In this village ringed by jagged mountains, the women give birth to many children. 5 or 6 is not uncommon. Just the other day, the wife of the village headman gave birth to her 10th child.
They really don't have television, I guess, to watch it.
No, there's actually a different reason. Jova.
And why do you think that is?
The young fellow asked the traveler, looking down at the snow-blanketed village. Kaim cocks his head in search of an answer. Meanwhile, the young man takes something like a piece of crystal candy from a small leather pouch. He puts it into his mouth and says with a laugh,
Because they die right away!
Children?
Uh-huh. Hardly anybody grows up to be an adult. Most kids die after 5 or 6 short summers. Look at the village's headman's wife. She's lost 7 kids already.
Ha ha ha! Children dying is funny.
They have a short life expectancy, so they screw to basically carry on the bloodline.
Whether from a genetic problem or a disease endemic to the area, the people of this village have always lived short lives, he says, from way, way back.
Now that you mention it,
says Kaim.
I haven't seen any old people here.
See what I mean? A few decades ago, I'm told, one person lived to be 50, but people say that's the oldest anyone ever got in the whole history of the village. This is why we give birth to lots of kids. Give birth to a lot and lose a lot. It is... If just one of them lives into adulthood, though, the family line is saved, and the village history continues. See my point? Live free and die young. It's funny because this reflects how life expectancy was way shorter back in ye old days.
The young man is 16, as is his wife. Their first child is due to be born any day now. Literally today or tomorrow. The young man crunches down on the candy in his mouth.
Where's the going?
He says, and around his wrists he winds the ropes and uses to pull the sled. He hasn't loaded the sled yet, but dragging it up the steep, snow-covered road is hard work. This, he says, is why the pay is so good. Only a few days earlier, he lost his good friend and fellow worker, who had been for years his senior. When Kaim happened along, the young man asked him if he would help him push the sled from behind until they cleared the pass. Kaim agreed, and they became an instant team.
So this is an interesting contrast. A man with everlasting life, witnessing people who enjoy what little and very short lives they have.
Kaim circles around to the back of the sled and asks,
You don't have any animals to pull the sled?
Afraid not,
says the young man.
I know it's strange, but our horses and cattle and donkeys all die young. You can spend a lot of money at the town market buying an animal. It'll keel over before it's done a lick of work. Finally, the best way is for us humans to plow the fields and pull the sleds ourselves.
The arms of which the young man himself is pulling his sled are massive, and he forges through the road's snowy cover with powerful steps. His fellow worker was stronger still, he says.
Taught me how to pull the sled, how to set rabbit traps, how to build a fire, all the skills I need to live with all the love he would give to a kid brother. Before I knew it, he was gone.
Dusting the snow.
Gone with the wind, you may say.
Indeed.
I wonder if maybe the mortality rate is because of more, rare air that we have up there.
We'll see too. People here always die suddenly, he says.
They can be perfectly healthy one minute and drop dead the next. No time for suffering, just like that. No time to call a doctor. Even if a doctor comes, there's nothing he can do.
Your friend died that way.
Uh-huh. He was shoveling the snow that piled up overnight, clearing the road when he dropped dead. By the time we ran over to help him, he was gone. That's how it always is. Always. It's how they die. Grown-ups, kids, everyone.
And you too, then.
I guess. Nobody knows when the time is coming. Might be decades from now, or it could be tomorrow.
Could be the next 5 minutes.
Is the plot twist going to be that they were literally born, and then they're programmed to die?
No, you'll see. After this cool pronouncement, the young man turns to Kaim and look, pointing to his own chest as with a smile.
Or maybe even now.
The smile is genuine, without a hint of despair or bitterness toward the cruelty of his fate.
Aren't you afraid to die?
Kaim starts to ask him if he stops himself. It's a stupid question, he decides, and one that he's not qualified to ask. How could a man burdened with eternal life find appropriate words to speak to a man burdened with the threat of sudden death?
Like I said, it's the perfect contrast and compare.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that was the entire point of the creation of this particular dream.
I'm actually surprised it took us this long to get this sort of opposition theme.
Kaim and the young man keep dragging the sled up the steep mountain path. Their destination is the lake beyond the pass. The young man's job calls for him to cut ice from the surface of the frozen lake and transport it back to the village.
We in the village call the life the spring of life.
If you trace the source
If
of
you
the
trace the source of the water
my
so
bad.
that bubbles out of the ground here and there in the village, you always wind up at the spring of life.
Okay. Kaim nods silently.
Mm-hmm.
God forbid the spring of life is what's causing them to die.
I mean, if it's something like a bacteria hidden in the ice, it might be possible.
The ice from the spring of life takes forever to melt. That's why, look, you can even do this.
Again, the young man takes a piece of the crystal candy, or rather ice, from his leather pouch and puts it in his mouth.
It gives you energy. It's indispensable when doing hard work for pregnant women. Or infants. Just put a piece in your mouth and it gives you instant strength.
The young man offers a piece to Kaim, who nods again in silence.
We're really not supposed to give any to outsiders, but you're special, because I'm putting you to work. If I give it to you, though, I want you to help me load the ice on the sled. I can handle it by myself on the way back.
Kaim silently accepts the ice from the young man, who assures him
Tastes good, too.
and watches him, smiling. Kaim averts his gaze somewhat and puts the piece in his mouth.
Grape jelly and mustard, my favorite.
Kaim, did your mother never tell you to not put things given to you by strangers in your mouth?
Hashtag yo. Technically.
The ice should be nothing but frozen water, but it has a mild sweetness, just as Kaim expected. He spits it out when the young man is not looking.
Poison. I know the taste.
Thinks Kaim. So
You
basically,
you would actually make a great poison taster for
So-
a
So I
kid
was
to get down
sort
to
of
it.
right.
no. Actually, it was more Jova who was close to the truth. Jova was one who guessed that the Spring of Life was doing it. The village people are used to this taste, so they think nothing of it. Without a doubt, though, there is poison in the ice. The long flow of time smooths over the wounds inflicted by history. The permanently snow-capped peaks make people forget the existence of the wild world on the other side. The young man calls his lake the Spring of Life, but those who lived far beyond the mountains, at the source of the river that feeds the lake, used to know it as the Pit of Death.
Okay,
Probably
so
why they
so
moved
Kaim's
out.
Okay, so Kaim's going to tell them, the village people, don't drink the water, you'll die.
Get better sources.
Long, long ago, several hundred years ago, the entire area around the river's source was polluted with the poisonous metallic outflow from a mine. The river was filled with dead fish floating belly up, and the poisonous gas that arose like a mist from the ground killed both the earthbound animals and the birds in the sky. The forest withered, and the lively town that had grown up with the development of the mine became a deserted ruin. So,
So it's
by,
not
God,
even a-
it's Death Stranding.
It's not even a pretty one. Poison from sediments of metal is possibly one of the worst things you can have.
nature took many years to recover, but the forest eventually turned green again, which attracted small animals and eventually the larger animals that hunted them. People, however, never came back, and there was no one left to hand down the story of the tragedy that occurred at the river source deep in the mountains. The only one who knows everything that has happened is Kaim, the man who has lived 1,000 years. So basically, you can sum up this entire dream with that terrible PSA. Don't you put it in your mouth. Don't you stuff it in your face. Don't try. It's not good to eat. The young man stands by the frozen lake and takes a nice, satisfying stretch.
You know,
He says to the traveler.
I sometimes think this village just might be the closest one to heaven in the whole world. Perhaps it's because we are too close to heaven that we're all summoned by the gods early on. Don't you think that might be true?
Kaim says nothing in response to this.
Serious?
Yeah,
So,
more like, that's cringe, bro.
Over many years, this lake has accumulated the metallic poison that floated into the upstream, and many years from the poison had infiltrated the soil that has mingled with the groundwater, bubbling up in the spring water of which the villagers shake their thirst. No one knows the exact chemical makeup of the poison, but at least it does not cause the villagers to suffer until, at the last moment of their lives, the accumulated poison suddenly takes its toll. This may be its one fortunate aspect. On the other hand, this might simply make the misfortune it brings all the more conspicuous.
They're literally drinking their own poison when you get down to it.
And again, it's not even that pretty, that there is some roots in real life tragedies about, abandoned mines that form poisonous water.
Still,
The young man says as he saws off a piece of ice by the shore.
I do hope that the children my wife and I will... the children my wife and I have will be able to live longer lives. Say, if we have 5, at least one of them will live long enough to grow up and have kids. That way for me, it would be like finding some new meaning in having been born into this world. It's the same with my father and mother and my grandparents. They all had a lot of kids and mourned the loss of lots of kids, but managed to raise 1 or 2 to adulthood before they died. That's what gives our life meaning.
He wipes the sweat from his brow and puts another piece of ice candy in his mouth.
If I were to tell him everything I know,
Thinks Kaim.
if I were to tell him everything that has been buried in the darkness of history, and if I were to tell the other villagers, the tragedy might not have been glad to repeat.
So,
Tell
do
them.
it then.
Or is it better to let them live in blissful ignorance?
And then William Shatner pops up, let them die!
Well, let's see how it goes.
God, this does sound a bit like a Star Trek plot.
The young man says.
When a baby is born here, they ring the village bell. And also when someone dies, the same for both. Birth and death are like 2 sides of the same coin. So there's no sadness when anyone dies. Everybody sees them off with a smile and a wish. You go ahead of us to heaven and save a good spot for us there. Do you understand that sentiment?
I do.
Says Kaim.
I do.
That's how we've always done it. Welcoming a lot of new lives to the village and sending lots of lives off to heaven. I've never been much of a student, so I don't know exactly how to put this, but I kind of think that maybe the village closest to heaven is a place where life and death are right next door to each other.
So these people are death doesn't even face them anymore. The young man gives Kaim an embarrassed smile
heartwarming but sad.
at sound of his own words.
Maybe it's because I'm about to have a kid of my own that I'm starting to think about these complicated things.
No, that's fine. I see exactly what you mean.
Kaim says. The moment the words leave his mouth, a bell sounds from the foot of the hill. Several long, slow rings.
That's it!
Exclaims the young man.
My child has been born!
He dips his head and says again, as if savoring the sound of his own words.
My child.
Yeah, I wonder if he said he's the wife who has died.
Ooh.
Remember, same bed for either cases.
They gave those
God
ice
forbid.
they gave those bits of ice to everybody.
And we know that this ice contains a lot of iron.
While the bell is rung likewise for births and deaths, the young man says the sound in each case is subtly different. When a young villager learns to tell the two apart, he or she is considered to be an adult.
I hope this one lives a long time.
The young man says, choking with the flood of emotions that show on his face, but then he goes as if to negate his own hopes for the future.
Either way, whether it lives a long time or not, my child has now been born into this world. That's all that matters. I'm so happy. So happy.
There's also the fact that I think even if we just stop right now, it will take probably years to recover.
Yeah, there's that too. Eyes full of tears, he turns a beautiful smile on Kaim, and then, still smiling, he collapses where he stands.
Well, I'll be
God
damned.
damn it.
He died for too much joy.
So even if Kaim had told him, it would have been too late.
Yep. That's
Right,
the
so
that's
Kaim
the
can tell everyone else though, right?
Kaim lays the young man's corpse on the sled and returns to the village. As the young man said, the villagers accept his death with the same smiles they had for the birth of his baby. Death is not a time for sorrow. It simply marks whether he has been called to heaven earlier or later. That's the thing to remember. This is their religion. So even if Kaim goes on and says this to them, they'll probably just expel him from the village for being a heretic or something like that.
I was also talking
that's
on
the thing, though. By doing nothing, Kaim is kind of complicit in a lot of needless deaths.
The young man's wife takes an ice candy from the leather pouch and has left behind and places it gently into the baby's mouth.
I want you to grow up to be strong and healthy.
She says.
Daddy is saving a wonderful place for you up in heaven. But go there slowly. Slowly. And until you go to heaven, I want you to grow up here in the village till you're nice and big.
Her words have the gentle tone of a lullaby.
There's also a physical factor which some stuff gets inherited during the pregnancy, and as a result generations will need to pass before being properly changed on a physical level, unfortunately.
Kaim says nothing. If he is to stand unflinchingly for what is right, his silence may be a crime. But burdened with eternal life, Kaim knows how suspect the right can be. Throughout history, people have fought and wounded and killed each other in the name of what they declare to be right. By comparison, the look on the dead young man's face is tranquility itself. The village closest to heaven is filled with happiness indeed. So basically, he doesn't want to interfere into businesses that are not his own, basically.
It's a very.
I would also
very
like to point
mixed
out that
issue.
in other dreams it has been, pretty much clear that Kaim has committed war crimes. So don't pretend he has been a saint.
So it's not like Kaim is a saint to
Nah.
begin with, anyway. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The baby starts to cry. Its loud wailing like a celebration at the beginning of its own life. However short that life is likely to be. Kaim leaves the village with a smile on his face. The village bell begins to peal, reverberating with utter clarity throughout the distant mountains as to bestow a blessing on the young man who lived life to the fullest with neither resentment nor regret. And then it causes everybody to fall asleep because of the weird material that it's made of.
God damn.
Silver.
And then everyone dies.
Oh my god, wait, but that means that the drinking water in Labyrinthia is also... Oh no.
And when
And
this
when this too long life of mine draws to a close,
Kaim thinks,
I'd be like to send off with the sound of bells like this if possible.
because he knows that day will never come, Kaim walks on, never stopping, never looking back. His long journey is far from over. So yeah, like Dwez was just saying, this was definitely not Kaim's best moment, depending on how you want to interpret the story, basically.
And then in a later cutscene, we're going to get a scene where a policeman from nearby this village finds him and is like, "Freeze! You're under arrest for complicity in genocide."
Also, game,
Knowing how the village works, the cop would be dead before he reaches him.
Final Fantasy VIII told me that the island closest to heaven is a place filled with terrible monsters.
Well, Final
You have to
Fantasy
be
VIII is a bit
specific with
daft.
that.
Well, remember, Tail, there's literally a moment in Final Fantasy where we climb into the door from the Truman Show. So that game, like Dwez just said, is a bit daft. So...
Weren't you the guy who stopped calling me that?
So how's that attunement leveling going?
So watching...
Don't tell me the fire reminds you of something.
Yes, it does.
Remember, Jova.
Well, Jova, if Layton can get reminded of a puzzle by every single little thing, why can't Kaim have...
Even so, Jova, remember, a bonfire can mean many things. It's not just a meme that Dark Souls made. A bonfire signifies a lot of things.
That's true,
people.
heck.
Actually, I like this one, actually. The waterfall lies deep in the forest, more than a day's travel from the nearest village. It is said to be a holy place. In search of the divine amid the towering peaks, pilgrims stand beneath the plunging falls in their final ascetic of course, classic. The water of the falls is freezing cold. All it takes is a momentary lapse of concentration and the person is hammered down by the rushing water.
Well, that sucks.
The
General religious belief of where, cold means pure and all, usually.
Japanese people really like this particular concept. That's why they have so many stories of these things. So it's called, the pilgrims call this waterfall the Stones of Heaven, as the title of the story as well.
That's the title of the dream.
Heaven is testing their mental and physical strength, they say, by hurling an endless stream of stones, quote unquote, down upon them is the form of the powerful waterfall.
Well, you see, guys, there's actually a village that's much closer to heaven.
And the stones... go ahead, Joe.
and the stones have a mysterious power.
A former pilgrim says to Kaim, with a pained smile. He himself failed in his final austerity, he adds.
Different stones of heaven fall on each person. It's as if they can see into your heart.
What do you mean?
Kaim asks.
The burdens you bore and the dreams you dreamed in the secular world appear to you one after another.
In his own case, he says, what came to him first were the voices of women.
One of them say, a stone of heaven fell on me one time. It hurts.
The temptation of the flesh.
The what?
Water punching down into the basin of the falls begins to sound like women's voices. Sweet voices whispering in my ear. Voices sobbing, voices moaning in a lover's embrace. An incredible variety. And for better or for worse, I knew every single one of them. Some I was thrilled to hear again, while others I hated remembering.
We call
the weirdest boner ever.
I guess so.
Yes.
Meaning you've gotten yourself into a lot of trouble involving women?
I have indeed. Not to boast or anything, but that was one battlefield I knew better than anybody. I survived, and I made a lot of women cry, and there was a lot of them I loved. My whole purpose in undertaking the austerities was to put that life behind me. But the stones of heaven know what they're doing. In the final test, they go after your greatest weakness. If you waver the slightest bit, you've had it. The waters slam you down and your austerities are over.
The man feeds a stick of kindling into the campfire.
And I'm not the only one.
He continues. So there you go. That's why
Your stone of heaven is to make you have a bunch of one-night stands.
Oh, what a horror. One fellow heard the voice of the mother he hadn't seen since he was a little boy. Another heard the voice of his dead child.
Is it always voices?
I wish it were. If you hold up through the voices, the waterfall's mist starts changing into the shapes of people. You might see somebody who you hated so much in the secular world you wanted to kill him. Or it might be some loan shark you had to go into hiding to get away from. One little flinch, and you're done for. So basically the IRS would be an absolute nightmare.
This particular austerity can be performed only once. There are no second chances. Someone who has persevered for a whole day and night, but who fails in the end, has no choice but to return to the secular world in defeat, as this man did.
Not that it was easy for me to get on my feet again once I was back there either.
The man chuckles and calls out to a young pilgrim, or more precisely, to a young man who was a pilgrim until a few moments ago, but who has just now dragged himself up to the lip of the basin in utter dejection.
Hey, young fellow, the campfire's over here. I've got liquor to warm up your insides and some fresh grilled meat. Get a little of that in your stomach and you'll have the strength to make it down to the village.
Don't drink the liquor, don't drink the liquor, it's got the death water in it.
That was just once, Luis.
Yeah, and then Kaim's like, one time!
One fucking time! And you're still, after all these years, you're still throwing that at my face.
Yeah, and then people keep throwing complicit genocide at me. It gets annoying after a while.
Welcome to being immortal and the consequences that come with that if people live long enough to remember.
Well, actually, in this case, it's Kaim that lives long enough to remember, you know?
Exactly. It's his inner voices talking to him.
Okay. The man now makes his living as a master of the tea house by the waterfall. Of course, pilgrims undergoing austerities carry no money with them, but the man is not expecting to become rich for doing his work. For bodies chilled by long hours of pounding under the waterfall, he provides a heartwarming fire, food and drink, and sometimes even money to tide them over when they first go down the village. Payment can be made at any time. The man can bring him the money that they have started to take in earnings again from jobs they find in the secular world. He sets no day for repayment. He takes no IOUs. He says that he is fine with that.
I don't need IOUs. If they're late for their payments, I just kill them. Where do you think the meat comes from?
He just gives them the bird from the Nokuni 2, but he also, you owe me!
Yeah, the meat comes from those who are late, and the wood for the fire is from their clothes, and the liquor is actually their pee.
Aren't there some who don't pay at all?
Kaim asks.
Of course there are.
The man says matter-of-factly.
but I think of my running this tea house as another kind of discipline for myself.
Another kind of discipline?
Oh, I know.
Right.
The Strucity.
The stones of heaven, strong, will accept only the strongest pilgrims, the ones unperturbed by anything. The role I want to play is to accept the ones who were broken by the stones of heaven, the weak human beings. I want to go on accepting the weakest of the weak, the kind who not only succumbed to the stones of heaven, but who rebelled against it in the end.
I don't know what's worse.
That is your
Strucity
kind of-
or Warriors WCW run.
That is your kind of discipline?
Exactly. Makes for a hard living, that's for sure. I thought I was prepared to deal with cheats and weaklings, but there are a lot more of those than I ever bargained for.
He declares with a hearty laugh. But then he quickly turns serious and says,
To tell you the truth, I think of this less as a form of discipline than as a way to get even.
Get even? With whom?
With those gods, or whatever they are, that keep hurtling down their stones of heaven.
human beings are weak.
Human, be-
Oh, sorry, never mind. It's still you. Sorry. Go on.
human beings are weak, shockingly so in the eyes of a god. But I think this is not just because of what happened to me, that being weak is the best thing about human beings. Weakness can make us cunning, but it can also make us kind. Weakness can torment us, but it can just as easily be our salvation. Don't you see? If the gods are hurling down their stones of heaven just to make people aware of their own weakness, just to make us savor our own powerlessness, then I just as soon drop my trousers and moon them. I'd slap my bare butt and say to them, I'm not like you. I'm not going to punish human beings for being weak. I accept them for what they are, weakness and all.
It's like Conan the Barbarian.
I like-
If you don't listen to me, then to hell with you.
I like this guy. The man feeds a new piece of kindling to the fire and says with a shy shrug.
Yeah, I guess I got carried away mooning the moon.
Kaim smiles and shakes his head as if to say,
Not at all.
I agree.
Tell me, Bill.
The man goes on.
I see you're a traveler, but you don't seem to be a pilgrim.
You're right, I'm not.
Kaim says.
I was trying to cross over the pass and took the wrong road in Albuquerque.
Well then, as long as you're here, why not give the stones of heaven a try? It'll be something to talk about.
No, thanks.
Kaim says, smiling.
He
And
already has
only
enough
begin to imagine what could show up.
God, his stones of heaven would probably be the
It's the
equivalent.
speed run, just fading 5 seconds.
What's the matter? Afraid they're gonna show you whatever it is that shakes you up?
The man smiles and nods.
Can't say I blame you, though.
The man is mistaken about Kaim. He is not the least bit afraid of such a thing. What scares him is the opposite prospect, that of not being shaken up, of encountering in himself a person unmoved by anything at all.
Interesting, so he's more scared by the idea that he won't have stones.
Remember when we first met Kaim at the beginning of this game, he was super apathetic about everything. So after living such a long life, he stopped even caring about anything. Period.
Living
It is
such a long life plus having the memory wiped, which
It's also
did
important
help
also
him.
for the bigger theme of the game, by the way.
It's similar.
Lack of emotion.
It's a good modern day equivalent would be Freyrun from Freedom Beyond Johnny's Zen. She also has a similar arc.
Yeah, where she's coming to terms with having to realize that, hey, even though elves are eternal, maybe humans are kind of meant to be the true inheritors of Earth, or essentially because,
Magic,
you
yeah.
know...
Anyway,
that and-
the guy said that the water is cold,
Two
basically.
new pilgrims have prepared themselves for the challenge of the Stones of Heaven. The men appear to be brothers. The older one keels at the edge of the basin, splashing himself and massaging the cold water into his skin from foot to heart level. The younger brother is too impatient for that. He wants to jump right into the falls. The other brother cautions him and takes all the time he needs to accustom himself to the water's coldness. He exudes the quiet power of one who has withstood the most rigorous training.
Average sauna in Sweden.
Man, my spirit medium training was more traumatic than I thought it would be.
No, it's Jova, sorry. Go on.
Aha!
The tea house owner says to Kaim, smiling.
We're in for a rare privilege. I think we're about to see the first successful attempt in a long while.
You can tell?
Kaim asks.
You can if you spend as much time here as I have. The winners and losers are decided before the men ever step under the falls. I have to say, even though he apparently failed, this guy seems to be going on quite the route of redemption.
Having completed his meticulous preparations, the elder brother enters the basin. Even then, the steps he takes are slow and cautious. The younger brother follows him in, kicking up a spray with every step.
The younger one is hopeless,
Says the man with a sigh, adding another stick of kindling to the fire.
I better get the liquor ready now.
He mutters to himself.
Why do I always get the drunks?
The brothers stand side by side beneath the pounding waterfall. The stones of heaven rain down upon them. As the men predicted, the elder brother, utterly calm, stands up to the onslaught of images sent by the stones of heaven. Also, as men predicted, the younger brother wields to the stones of heaven and is beaten down into the basin of the waterfall. But then, something happens that goes far beyond what the men predicted.
Okay.
This ought to be interesting.
Writhing in agony, the younger brother bops helplessly in the basin, unable to raise himself. He is drowning.
Ow!
Yeah, basically. He tears at his own chest. His heart is failing. He was not fully prepared to enter the icy water. Go ahead, Bibbs.
Help me, brother, please!
But the elder brother doesn't move. He remains under the waterfall in total concentration.
And that will cost him his brother.
Man, he's even a shittier brother than Daniel is. All right.
Hey! What are you doing? Hurry and help him!
The man yells, but the elder brother's expression remains unchanged. He never flinches.
He's drowning! You can't just leave him like that! He'll die!
The elder brother never moves. He grits his teeth, keeps his eyes damp shut, and shows no sign of moving out from under the waterfall, as if to declare, "This is it! This is the final test of the stones of heaven!" The man screams at him,
You idiot!
and dives into the rolling basin in a rash effort to help the younger brother.
I like to imagine that this man looks like the actual Higashi Mishi.
I love how the tea house...
The older brother's like, this is revenge for not letting me play with your toys.
For the moment of his entrained body hits the frigid water, the shock of it seizes his heart. Still, he reaches out toward the drowning brother, who is sinking beneath the surface. A great shudder goes through him, and with an enormous groan he takes hold of the young man's wrist and pulls his limp body toward him. He tries to return to the shore, but his strength gives out. And he falls back into the water. I love how the tea house owner is the only person in here who's sane.
It kind of literally
Next,
just watch all...
it is Kaim's turn to dive into the basin beneath the falls. He takes hold of the two unconscious men and drags them toward the shore. The stones of heaven pour down on Kaim, and he is assaulted by one vision after another. Battlefields, scenes from his wanderings, shooting stars, the climbing and sinking sun, raging winds, and countless deaths of those he has come to know on the road of his all-too-long life.
And yeah, so some of these boards are, connected to dreams we have seen before, like the shooting stars. So that's actually kind of neat as a callback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is definitely a dream that will benefit from you doing other dreams prior.
Do you no good.
He silently declares to the gods, hurling the stones of heaven at him.
My heart remains unmoved. I live through a reality far crueler than any phantom of you can show me.
Whether or not his life is a sign of his strength, he does not know. He will not boast of it, nor will he tell the tale to others. He has, however, lived it. That much is certain. He has lived it for the years.
So Kaim may very well have passed the task.
Also, I wasn't aware that matter-of-factly was a word. Matter-of-factly.
Oh, it is.
Kaim climbs into the shore and lies the limp bodies into the tea house master and the younger brother beside the fire. As he warms himself, he thinks,
The gods who hurl the stones of ever are inferior gods.
If they could truly see into heaven... Oh, is it? Okay.
No, it's... Go on.
I am foolish enough to show Kaim scenes from his past, for what would disturb him most of all would be unwelcome sights and moments from his own limitless future. And if they were to ask him one simple question, for what purpose were you born? His knees would buckle in an instant.
I love how Kaim just did the equivalent of puny god to the gods on that one.
Basically, yeah.
I mean, when you're immortal, you kinda don't have much of a limit.
Although I prefer the tea house.
That's a Prometheus.
Although I prefer the tea house master's method, moon the gods.
Prometheus,
Moon them.
you have to remember, John, Prometheus was a titan, it was a bit different.
The first to regain consciousness is the young pilgrim. The tea house master's condition is critical. Kaim's attempts to warm him and massage his clenched heart have little effect.
Pull yourself together now. Look, we got a fire. The fire built. Let it warm you.
Kaim shouted into his ear until the man finally manages to force his eyes open a crack and move his purple lips.
Wouldn't that be something? Dying trying to save someone who was doing the challenge because his older brother couldn't be bothered.
Jova.
Is he alright?
Sure, he's fine. Don't worry.
Good. Good.
Pull yourself together, man.
Tell me, his strength, same as coldness.
Never mind. Stop talking.
Because if it is true, his strength is coldness. I don't want any part of it.
Me neither. The man gives Kaim a faint smile and closes his eyes. He will never open them again.
I tried to save a complete stranger.
This guy was too good for this world. Human beings are weak and fragile. All it takes for a person to die is for a fist-sized organ to stop beating. Human kindness, on the other hand, may derive from everyone's profound awareness of the fragility of life, like the Tea House Master.
Interesting. Somebody who supposedly failed the test was probably better than somebody who, I
It's
guess,
kind of the
succeeded.
entire point of the story.
Yeah,
basically.
facing the Tea House's master's lifeless corpse, the younger brother hangs his head and cries. This weak man, defeated by the Stones of Heaven, sheds heartfelt tears for the man who saved his life. His strong elder brother, meanwhile, is still being pounded by the waterfall, unfazed by
Dude
the Stones
hasn't
of Heaven.
moved.
Basically, the main moral of the story is compassion trumps strength, basically. Surely his strength will be recognized by the gods, and he will bring his aesthetic training to perfect completion. Still, Kaim finds the tear-stained face of the younger brother beautiful in a way the stronger elder brothers never can be, and he wishes that he himself could be moved like the younger man. There was an unmatched nobility in that last smile of the Tea House Master who gave up his life to save that of a complete stranger. Kaim wishes that he too could experience such feelings.
The sad thing is, if this is post-memory wipe, he may very well have felt those feelings back when he
No,
was a
it's
kid.
pretty much clear that he's still before the events of the game. Most of his dreams, if not all of the dreams, they took place before the events of the game starts. And what on my own face?
Living through 1,000 years of life is not strength. Yet burdened with a life he cannot lose, will Kaim ever be able to change weakness into kindness? This he cannot tell. He can only live, unknowing. He can only walk on. He can only continue his journey. Kaim looks at his reflection in the basin of the waterfall. On the water's heaving surface, he sees the trembling face of a lonely wanderer.
Vulnerability.
The
Well,
end.
I will
Well, that
say
was
this.
depressing.
I will say this, though. One good thing to come from this, assuming that this does take place before the main story, or at least the point where he married and had a kid, is that we do know that in spite of all this, he was able to find happiness. Admittedly, before Gongora had to screw things up because
It's a
he's
roller
kid.
coaster, Jova,
It
basically.
is important to remember too that the 1,000 years of dreams started right after they left their world, and Gongora removed all of their memory shit.
True,
So-
but you have to remember that what happens at the beginning of the game is like an extra memory wipe at the end. That's why he tasked Jensen to make sure that they were still kept in track.
Yep.
I will say it would be interesting if a recurring theme was like, well, okay, is like, say the dreams that you can get as early as like the start of the game, those are, the earliest dreams, the ones that were closest to when they first came. And the idea is like the way the memory wipe works is like you get dreams that were farther back earlier, and then you get the you get the memories that were more recent back the latest, essentially, which would coincide with, us getting dreams, if they pretty much already confirmed, okay, the order of dreams that you received are from like, this era to the latest. Since they couldn't necessarily always guess what order you'd get them in, at the very least, I'd say like, the ones you get in like the first stage, these are like the earliest phase of Kaim's life, and so on and so forth. It descends with like each area that you can get them in.
The one dream that's obligatory. Well, so technically there are three. There are three dreams that are obligatory. The first one that serves as a tutorial for it. The two dreams by Seth that tells our backstory, and later on we're gonna get Ming's dream that tells our entire backstory. And that dream is also just given to you in a cutscene instead of you having to look for it. But one final thing I want to say before we finish this part, though, I actually kind of disagree here. I think I think a better word instead of depressed would be more bittersweet, because while it is true that the Tia's master dying is indeed a sad thing, I do think that there's also an heartwarming aspect to it about the Tia's master proving that compassion is far more beautiful than strength.
True, but aside from Kaim, and as it's true case, he barely talks with anyone about it, it would not resonate. And once again, if a tree falls into a forest and no one is there to hear it, as it really fell.
I guess like that one particular line from this stream that's very poignant to me is the whole if coldness is strength, I want none of it. And
we have to hope that the younger brother actually, possibly spreads this, but depends ambiguously on that.
Personally, if the older brother ends up dying from the Stones of Aben, my reaction will be, you know what, you get what you get.
No, I was talking about the younger brother, the one that survived.
Yeah, the younger brother. Well, the younger brother at the very least survived, so he'll be able to tell the Tia's master's story. But anyway, we're dragging this out. See you for the next part, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.